Walk us through it if you could, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you very much. House Bill 126, LC 550405.
Roger that.
All right. It seeks to create a small business alcohol retail permit. The reality is, while Georgia's been named the #1 state for business for over a decade, the rules and regs of our state don't always support small businesses. This bill seeks to create an opportunity to remedy this in the world of alcohol. Unfortunately, the system is not conducive to small restaurant and other small businesses that wish to supplement their revenue with minimal alcohol sales. The regulations also do not reflect what's happening in the real world. In the real world, small retail establishments can't meet the minimums required for 7 suppliers, don't have the storage or the cash flow to order a 3-month supply, and have no way to solve a missed shipment from a distributor. Like all legislation, people are for legislation and against legislation. I also like to seek the facts and weigh the pros and cons of a bill. And the only negative I see with this bill is change. It helps support small businesses. It brings more revenue into the state. It brings more revenue in for the distributors, and it lessens the distributors' ability to have to deal with unprofitable accounts and helps it. It also helps other retailers. This bill is not attacked on alcohol distribution or the 3-tier system. I think it actually modernizes it and makes it more efficient for all retailers. So I'll go through just a couple of lines on the bill. But at the end of the day, what it seeks to do is it seeks to isolate and create a small business alcohol permit based upon sales and based upon percent of revenue. This would allow somebody, let's say if you're running a restaurant and you only sell, $2,000 or $3,000 a week in beer, wine. If you're out of Bud Light, you can predetermine a retailer in your county or municipality that you can go buy from a retailer and bring it back and sell it in your business. And the reason being is, at the end of the day, when you have to deal with you have a supplier for Bud Light, you have a supplier for Miller Lite, you have a supplier for wine, you have a supplier for Tropicalia. Each supplier carries a $250 minimum. If you're not able to meet that threshold, then you have to obviously order a bunch of product to get it in to be able to have it to sell. It's obviously more beneficial as a retailer to buy it through the distributor because the pricing's better and you're not paying sales tax on that product. But it's something versus foregoing revenue that you wouldn't make otherwise if you didn't have the product. You're willing to take that on the chin. And I think that it's, I think the numbers that I put on there, $250,000 or 25% of the gross annual revenue are negotiable. But I think it is something that we need to look at so that businesses can get into this area and be more efficient in their purchasing. I think of if most of us that have been around here long enough go down to Ponce City Market. You've got each little business is its own business. You may go through the line and get a burrito, and at the end they may have a bottle of beer that you can buy. Well, that person there doesn't have the storage capacity to buy a bunch in the back of their storefront. And if they're selling a variety of different beers, they're dealing with 3 or 4 suppliers. It's not the main focus of their business, but it's something that when people buy a burrito, some of them want to drink a Corona, and so it just adds a value to your product. But it's as it sits today, it's really inefficient. And so I'll be glad to take any questions, go over anything.
Sure. Chairman Carpenter, if I could, just a couple questions for you.
Yep.
So you mentioned there's a $250 minimum today for an order to a distributor.
Yes, sir.
And I guess I should say, just so that our friends in the audience know, tell us what you do for a living so that when I ask you questions about it,
that's right. So I have a brew pub restaurant that sells a lot more than that. I also have a hotel where I've actually experienced this problem, and I have a wedding venue and then a meat and 3 that doesn't sell beer.
Okay.
So I come from a total retail position. Some sell alcohol, some don't sell alcohol. Obviously, the Oakwood sells pot roast and fried chicken. We're not getting in the alcohol business. But, being in that business, it hadn't been as big a problem at our pizza brew pub because we sell enough beer, it's not an issue, but it has become an issue in the hotel. And then speaking with other people that run little vignette businesses in these food halls, etc., or barbershops that sell beer while you get your hair cut, or boutique stores that provide alcohol for their customers while they're shopping. Like, these are issues that are occurring. And, you know, like most things, I think if this is happening in the real world and both sides know it's happening, why can't we create legislation to make it legal so these people don't have fear of misdemeanor, et cetera?
I'm certainly not in that line of work, so I'm asking questions from
Sure.
a place of understanding. How often do you feel like, you know, that $250 minimum is too excessive, or you know, I just need a case of beer,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
2 bottles of wine?
Well, I will say if you run out of Mick Ultra on Friday night and you're not getting a delivery till Wednesday night, it happens. And I would say that the 250 comes into play on smaller venues and stuff every time. Because especially in the liquor world, like, people have brands they want to drink. Even if you don't carry a huge assortment of brands, you're buying from 7 different people. And so it is very difficult to navigate purchasing without a bunch of storage and buying a bunch of stuff and just letting it sit back there.
Sure. Thank you. Questions from the committee? No? Okay. If you will,
Yeah, perfect.
pop a chair. We have our friends from the Department of Revenue who are going to be here to speak to the bill. I think we've got
Austin Gibbons.
Yep, and the presentation is, I think your clicker's up there. So I'll let y'all, Austin, if you will, introduce yourself and anybody who's with you, and y'all dive in and take it from there.
Thank you, Chairman Dubnik, Chairman Carpenter, members of the committee, and of course, Ms. Jan, who runs the world. So my name's Austin Gibbons. I serve as Chief of Staff for the Department of Revenue, and I've got Robert Flournoy and Amy Doherty, who are 2 of our special agents, and we'll talk more about kind of what implementation of House Bill 126 would look like. As you're all aware, you know, the department doesn't take policy positions on bills. That's the job of the General Assembly. We just implement, and here we are to kind of talk about what this bill might look like in practice.
Thank you all for having us today. My name is Robert Flournoy. I'm a special agent in charge of one of our enforcement districts out of Albany that covers Albany and Macon offices. Amy is the assistant special agent in charge, so we cover 46 counties in Georgia out of our office. And what we're here to talk about with you today is implementation of this bill. Austin, give me a tutorial real quick, please, sir. Okay, thank you, sir. All right, I'm not going to bore you with PowerPoint too much, but there are some points on here. We're here representing the commissioner, deputy commissioner, and Danny Bates is our division director. Just a quick overview of the 3-tier system. 3-tier system is the foundation of the Title III. It was reaffirmed in a past recent session. It basically sets the framework for how alcohol is manufactured, distributed, and sold in the state of Georgia, along with probably 3/4 of the country. Its main purpose is to further regulate and control alcoholic beverage transactions. It promotes and assures public health by having each tier responsible for making sure that they're giving you a good product. Promote the orderly marketing of alcoholic beverages, prevent unfair business practices, foster a vigorous and healthy competition in the alcohol industry, and preserve and promote a robust, stable system of distribution of alcohol to the public. Obviously, it's in code. This committee is probably well aware of the 3-tier system. Some of the provisions of 126 and the budget impact, if it's passed, that we will face is this bill would create a subcategory of a license that we already have, which is a consumption on premise license. And just to differentiate and bring you up to speed on the different types of retail licenses, a consumption on premise license is a typical restaurant license that sells beer, wine, and liquor. If a restaurant chooses only to sell beer and wine, they have the same retail license that a grocery store or convenience store would have. And to all of these license holders, the middle tier, which is our distribution tier, already services every one of these retailers. House Bill 126 would create a need for implementation of new laws. we'd have to promulgate regulations to back those up, and update our systems and create new processes for it. Many current licensees in the state that fall into one of these retail licenses potentially could qualify under this new subcategory based off of their sales volume. So we anticipate that if this is passed, that a lot of people that are licensed currently as a retailer or a COP, consumption on premise retailer, that they would want to migrate to this new license. One of the bigger logistical factors we have is that the income that would have to be verified, that would be a new standard for us as far as how to qualify. Because now with license qualifications, we're qualifying the individual. This, we would have to be qualifying the business and its earnings. And we would have, because of the way that small business income is reported annually, sole proprietorships come to mind right off the bat, where their personal income taxes are filed along with their business taxes, that we would have to have auditors or specially trained people that could look at those annual filings and be able to pull the correct information out of it to verify that they do in fact qualify for this. Another logistical issue we have is that inspections of the business for compliance and audit for compliance could only occur after tax filing, because it's an annual amount that's stipulated to in the bill. And currently we also, and by code, we have a renewal period, a license period of a calendar year, with a renewal season that starts in October and goes through the end of the year. Under this new subcategory, because of when we would get we would have to have the filings, their tax filings, we would have to change that renewal season for this specific license. And that would be different than every other license that we have. So those are some of the top issues for that. IT system updates, our internal system. Obviously, everything we do is online through a system we call ITS. We would have to have our developers create a subcategory for the COP license. They would have to develop the new permits and licenses to be issued to the new licensees and their agents, and the documentation that they would produce to the retailers that they designate that they purchase from. We would also need to create new reports to comply with auditing. Some things that we have in place now would be like a wholesaler's monthly reports. It would probably be something kind of similar to that. Excuse me. Something similar to that. But those will also be necessary. And we would have to create new procedures to process these licenses because, as I stated earlier, the current way that licenses are investigated to see if they meet compliance before they're issued is we look at the person. The person has to qualify through a series of requirements that are in code. In this case, we would be qualifying the business alone based off of the annual sales. So that would be a departure from how we conduct business now going forward. And then obviously an IT system update would have to maintain the records and records maintenance and storage, which are all factors with implementing this. So some of the impacts for us, our thoughts is this could open the door for big box retailers, that they could promote discounts and rewards for these small businesses, because obviously these small businesses, if they're permitted to go to a retailer, which could be a Sam's Club, a Costco, a grocery store, to purchase beer and wine, a large package store for their liquor, that they would be buying in bulk more so than the standard customer. And it could create a preferred customer almost with the small businesses. Another issue that we see is it places a record-keeping burden on the business that is selling to the retailer that's selling to the small business. Currently, they don't have a record-keeping burden, but if they took on a role similar to a wholesaler in this point, then they're going to have to maintain records on their business-to-business sales as well as keeping that separate from their business to their normal consumer sales. So there is definitely a record-keeping burden that will be placed on them. Regulatory needs, again, we talked about required licensing qualifications and checks. This bill does not currently account for, and I'll just go through, when we get a new application for somebody that wants to have an alcohol license, they have to provide us with certain documents. They have to clear a criminal background check. They can't be a convicted felon in the last 10 years. They can't be a convicted misdemeanor in the last 5 years. We also look at their financial data that they say if they report to us that they're investing $150,000 into this business, then we have to look at the where the money's coming from, whether it be a loan, personal savings, a gift from a friend. We have to verify that the money is coming from who they say it's coming from and that it's going where they say it's going. And we do this to prevent a couple things. One, to make sure that we're not getting any type of criminal enterprise that's trying to get into the alcohol system. And we also do it to verify that they do have the funds to be successful in the business. We also, for tier violations, and what a tier violation is because of the three-tier system, if you're in the manufacturing tier, that's the tier you're staying. There cannot be any cross-tier relationships between a manufacturer, a wholesaler, or a retailer. Those are all what we consider tier violations, and there's some of those that are in code. And we vet that, so when the applicant applies, we run him through our systems to see if he has any financial interest or ownership interest in any business that's not on his tier. It also is for the purpose of maintaining that they only have 2 package stores, which is in code. So those are regulatory issues that would need to be dealt with 126 as well. One thing that's also not in the bill that we would need to deal with from a regulatory standard is creating record retention schedules for these retailers and the small business. Currently, a retailer is required to keep invoices at the business location for a period of 3 years. And that's so that when we come in to do an inspection, we can verify that they've been purchasing from where they're supposed to get it from. And that also that they're not in conflict with any other thing like cost, selling below cost and other regulatory issues. And this bill does not have any retention schedules written into it, so that would be something that we would have to deal with. We also have requirements for wholesalers during transportation, wholesalers and manufacturers during transportation, but predominantly in this scenario, we would look at if the retailer is going to be allowed to take their personal car the small business take their personal vehicle or whatever to a retailer and pick up a large quantity of alcohol, we would ask that there be certain documents that they keep with them, the same type of documents we require of wholesalers now or salesman reps that work for wholesalers, because a lot of salesman reps drive their personal vehicles and they carry some quantity of alcohol to their different account holders, and through regulation we make sure that they have the proper ID identifying them as a salesman's rep and the invoicing information for the alcohol they're carrying. And that's not in the bill either, but it was something that we would need if this was passed. And that's some examples of what the The wholesalers and their reps currently have to keep with them a copy of their license, authorization letter, receipts, invoices, all required to accompany the alcohol when being transported to the retailer from a small business. All right, some legal gaps that we are concerned about with the House bill is several existing laws that this creates some type of, in our interpretation, some kind of conflict with. One is purchased from other than a wholesaler. Obviously, if this is passed, that is it wouldn't apply to this subcategory of retailer, but it would still apply to other licensees. We've already talked about the need to vet the licensee, not just the business, through fingerprints of applicants, and that's our criminal background search. We don't see anything in the bill that addresses distance issues to churches or schools for this new subcategory of licensee. And the next one's a typo, 3.2. It should be 3.22. I'm sorry for that. Or excuse me, 3.27. But that is what is currently in law that specifies when alcohol licenses are issued, when they expire, and when the renewal period begins, which, if we're basing this off of tax filings, we all know that's the lovely April 15th, and so we would need a new or an amended time frame for this specific license. Another concern we have is the bill does not currently provide for local licensing or address local excise tax collection. You know, Georgia is a local option state, which means that before the state issues a license, the locals have to approve the business and issue their permanent annual license. And under our current system, the way that the local excise taxes are collected is the retailer would keep up with, would provide the local government their drink sales or whatever information they want. But the locals have the option to come to us to verify that they're giving us the same information. They also can go to the wholesaler and verify that what was delivered there matches what the retailer provided to the local government and to collect the proper tax. So those are all some issues there. Apologies for this. There you go. Another thing that going back to licensing a little bit is I kind of give you a quick rundown on how we get an application and how it goes. It sounds quick because we're in here in brief time, but the reality is that when we get an application, even once we have the local license, and that could take some time, for us to get all of the documentation that's required and vet the individual to make sure that they qualify under current law, we are usually looking at 45 to 60 days. And that's probably a good average. Some take longer if they have issues. If there's any outstanding taxes owed the state, that holds up a licensee. If there's any distance issues that need to go out and be physically measured or have a survey done on, that holds up. And a lot of times getting the information, if it's a complicated application where there's a lot of investors or a lot of money being invested and the money's coming from different sources, verifying all those sources of investment takes some time. So under this new subcategory, if it turns out that a lot of our current licensees would fall under this 250,000, 25% rule that's stated in there, and we have a lot of people trying to transfer over, it wouldn't be as simple as just transferring the license type or just saying, now you're one of these. It would require them a new application, and so we would get inundated with that. But it just takes a lot of time, and our resources would probably be taxed a good bit there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I know Chairman Jaspers has some questions.
Hey, thank you, Agent Flournoy. Got the first couple of slides. You're talking about individual income, and first I want to say I appreciate y'all's seriousness always in dealing with these regulatory issues. It is a very regulated industry, and y'all do a great job doing that. But you're talking about income, but I see in the bill, it really just talks about gross revenue.
Yes, sir.
I'm not individuals' revenue. And maybe I got Chairman Williamson here to straighten me out on taxes, as he does about every day here. But it seems pretty straightforward of what those would be, and that part of that argument I just didn't get in here.
Well, gross revenue, and I'm not a tax agent, so you'll have to bear with me on this, but the gross revenue would be determined annually, if I'm reading the bill correctly. If it's a scenario where we are just asking the business to tell us what their final number in gross revenue is, and then we verify that that's less than $25 or $250,000, then that could be pretty straightforward. But we would need the documentation to verify that.
Yeah, this would seem to be a pretty straightforward number that
Right.
Chairman's came up with. And I just didn't see the income is an issue. And I guess it's really for the bill's author. It seems to me that you're wanting to move from going to the distributor to buy product to go to Costco. I mean, that not just that I need a bottle of X on Thursday night, but that's what this looks like.
Sure. And so the two things I would argue, first piece, the revenue piece, the retailer's submitting monthly reports and paying sales tax to the Department of Revenue. So they have that revenue number in-house. Now, whether the two sides are communicating, I would probably say not at this time, but it's something that's doable. I don't think the number has to be $250,000. This is not an attempt to create a massive transfer of permits from most of your franchises to this permit and create all kinds of problems. But, whatever that number looks like, is it 50,000? Is it 100,000? Whatever that number looks like to match what's happening in the real world. I'm not interested. Not every community has a Costco in their municipality. Not every community has a Sam's Club, and Sam's don't even sell alcohol, I don't think, in the state of Georgia. There may be one. So it's not about creating a big box retailer. It's about providing an efficient manner for small businesses to operate. And I think there's some points in the slide, a lot of regulatory stuff that the idea was none of that changes, the fingerprinting, none of that changes in this. Now, if it's not in there, I'll be glad. This is the first time I've seen the Department of Revenue on this, and we dropped this like 2 weeks ago. So if it's not in there, I'm not trying to change that. I'm not trying to let criminals get this license. What I am trying to do is give people an opportunity and to make it more efficient. And as a restaurateur, I'm in the catering business. All right, we already have a subset for catering license. We already have a subset for brew pubs. So it's not outside the realm of the system to create subsets. I'm catering, I have a 10-person minimum. I won't deliver food to you unless you order for 10 people because it doesn't make financial sense. All right? But I do allow my customers, if they want to order cater for 6, to come to the restaurant and pick it up. And what I'm saying is that does not exist right now in this world. Mm-hmm. And we can argue if it's safe, it's any safer. Do I keep the receipt from the alcohol store to show I bought 2 12-packs of beer and carried it over here? Like, the amount of alcohol I'm talking about is not something if you got pulled over, you were going to be looking at some issues. And so if the number needs to drop to make it reasonable, or if the retailer in the county doesn't want to participate, they don't have to participate. And if people can't find retailers that want to participate, then they're in trouble. They don't have an option. But I have a feeling that it's something that's not going to blow the place up, but provides a solution that's happening in the real world.
Chairman Williamson.
My question is, what here is you do everything right. You're unbelievable entrepreneur, retail entrepreneur up in your area of Dalton. But everybody looking at the broad landscape of Georgia, you've seen possibility of abuse. And my question, I guess, I should have started with this. Is it the same pricing for the product that you get delivered to your hotel
bottle of vodka or whatever as you would get at local liquor store. Is the pricing different? And my question, what I'm trying to get back to is, would you have less scrupulous business owners going and get a cheaper product that's coming through the three-tier system where we know the taxes are being collected?
Sure. So I think the first argument is it's all going through the three-tier system now. You're just, instead of me buying it direct, I'm buying it indirect, but the distributors are still selling the product at both places. Is there a price discrepancy? The wholesalers can tell. I don't know that. I do know that they offer bottle discounts sometimes. If you buy 12, you get one free, but that's offered, I think, uniformly across the state, because the slide earlier said we want to make sure there's not price fluctuations in the, but they can tell you whether or not. I actually think restaurants buy it a little cheaper because they're selling it by the glass. So it's not financially advantageous for somebody to go to the liquor store and pay sales tax on it and get it. I don't think so. And the other piece about the bad actors, I would argue that they're probably already doing that anyway. And so what you're trying to do, like most things we do, is let's make the people that want to follow the law be able to follow the law. Because the bad actors are bad actors, and they're buying it and selling it, and they're doing whatever they're doing anyway.
Hey, Mr. Chairman. Anything else before we turn to audience participation point?
No, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you both. We've got a couple folks signed up to speak. Mike, if you want to come on up, introduce yourself, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Mike Griffin. I'm the Public Affairs Representative with Georgia Baptist Mission Board. And Georgia Baptists have been consistent that we're not for loosening any of the restrictions on alcohol sales. We passed a resolution in 2021, the Georgia Baptist Convention, entitled Resolution on the Impact of Alcohol on Public Health and Safety. And Georgia Baptists represent about 1.4 million Georgians, about 3,500 churches. And that's been the consistent stand that we've had over a number of years, so we would have to oppose this legislation. And again, I've dealt with this since 2007. I came down here after I ran for state rep against Allen, now and our good friends still. But, you know, I'm 64, and some of us, we identify, and I said, I think it was in 2007 when I was here when we were dealing with Sunday alcohol sales. I said it, and as I look at how things have been going over since 1972 and 73 in my own county in South Georgia, I said, you know, it looks like we're not going to be satisfied till alcohol is sold 24/7, including lemonade stands one day. Because it seems that we're heading back to what was a pre-1930 period where we're going to have a wild, wild west of alcohol. That's not what our state representative is asking to do right now. I'm just saying it's like putting a frog in a cauldron. If you want to boil him, you can't put him in hot water to start with. You just keep turning it up a degree, another degree, another degree, another degree. And again, I've got all the data here, so I mean, I got enough here to choke a horse. The facts are out there. I mean, we were literally talking about the difference between selling alcohol and Big Macs, and there is a big difference. I've never seen anybody eat 5 Big Macs and then get in a fight afterwards, and unless somebody's trying to steal your 6th one. I mean, I've got tons of data here from the National Institute on Drug Abuse. I've got an article from the Washington Post, American Addiction Center's statement saying alcohol is the most harmful drug. So again, we're talking about regulation of drugs, and I can go of a drug that's considered that way, and that's why the state, going back to 1940, has been so stringent on alcohol sales. I mean, I literally have a case here from basically 1945 where the Supreme Court was ruling, you were just talking about the distance requirements. And the Supreme Court called it was necessary because of the evils of alcohol. Again, that may not be everything that's going on here in this one particular bill, but we are concerned that it's another step. And I think our communities need to be educated that alcohol is not like drinking a Diet Coke. I mean, there's something more to it. And I'm not here lobbying on behalf of prohibition. That's not what we're about. Our whole issue has to do with the public health and safety issues. You know, I've got the information, the data here, and I don't know you want to sit here and listen to all that. But, you know, the impact that it's having, and it's actually gotten worse since COVID when it comes to DUIs, traffic accidents, abuse that's going on in marriages and homes and things. All these things have happened because there's been the increase of the sales. And so we would not be for it because of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Williamson, did you have a question?
I think I have a real quick question. Thank you, Mike. Is Georgia Baptist, have you weighed into any kind of policy discussions about this Delta 9 stuff, which is an intoxicating beverage?
We are. I was supposed to have been here at 8 this morning to testify on Delta 8. There's a Delta 8, whatever variant.
But it's an intoxicating
The loophole.
beverage. Evidently
Yeah.
created through a loophole in the federal agriculture.
Yeah, and we've got that on our bill list this year, and we're going to be testifying to close that loophole.
We need to, at a minimum,
Right.
supportive of some kind of regulatory environment where
Definitely.
definitely
Yes, we're as well. Yes, those are things we're concerned about. Again, we believe in the right of people to make those kinds of choices, but I've got that information from the federal government, so I know it's true. But I've got the data that says accessibility equals sales, sales equals consumption, and the more consumption equals the potential of problems. So that's why they call them convenience stores, because they're convenient. So the more accessibility to alcohol, the more people will buy it, the more they will drink it. Not saying they should not have access, but accessibility. I think that's why the state government has tried to put some clear lines to make sure that it doesn't become a wild, wild west of alcohol again like we had before Prohibition.
Seeing no other questions, thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Chair.
it.
Thank
Mr. Cortez, if you will, join us, please, sir. Introduce yourself to the committee.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Joseph Cortez with the Georgia Craft Brewers Guild. Thank you for the opportunity just to share some feedback. We do not currently have a position. We are neither supportive or opposed yet. In fact, at this point, we'd like to applaud Chairman Carpenter for raising some important issues of the need for some common sense reforms to a system that is 100 years old. We've had some positive steps over the past several years, as was mentioned previously. But it is a system that, by and large, too often does not fit the needs of 21st century business models for small businesses, not just on the retail side, but in our case, on the producer side. It was also mentioned that about 3/4 of states have a 3-tier system in place, which is true. However, 40 states in the District of Columbia, for example, have allowed for limited self-distribution for small breweries in those states, and that recognizes the need for some updates to an antiquated system that fits 21st century business models and also consumer preferences. There are still regulations and laws on the books that protect consumers. We don't allow drinking under 21. We have all the common sense regulations that actually protect communities, but not allowing small businesses the flexibility that they desperately need more than ever, because actually alcohol consumption is down. The federal government has been very clear about the data over the past couple of years. Despite loosening some of the regulations for these businesses, alcohol consumption over the past couple of years, post-COVID, has started to go down across the board. And again, thank you to Chairman Carpenter for bringing this to the committee. We would just ask that you also consider, for us, the glaring deficiency is how we address some of the needs for producers that are out there. And clearly the system doesn't fit retailers' needs and that flexibility. The same is true for producers, and we have some ideas on how we can do that moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank
Chairman
you.
Williamson, you have a question?
Representative Williamson, there's a distinction between, and I'm not probably the foremost authority in the room on it, between the Delta 8 and the Delta 9. As I understand it, and I'm going to maybe check with revenue, our folks have the opportunity to get to wade into Delta 9 with a specific license, which is the drinks, not added to alcohol, but just specifically the straight up drinks. Folks are looking at that flexibility, but again, we recognize the need for some common sense reforms. We also don't think that we need to create another antiquated class for that gives one tier the opportunity to wrap their arms around it and not flexibility for small businesses. It is another class of intoxicating beverage. Correct. Just like it's illegal to drink and, yes, sir, just like it's illegal to drink and drive, and there are consequences for that, I think that would look the same for those beverages. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We believe, if I may briefly, there are opportunities to regulate those specific issues that you brought up without making it a straitjacket for these businesses that don't give them the flexibility they need to thrive.
Thank you. Mr. Cortez, appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. Mr. Smith, if you will, come up, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Martin Smith, the Executive Director of the Georgia Beer Wholesalers Association, and there's been a lot of talk about one particular thing today, and that's small businesses. And I want to make it clear that I represent an association that's made up of completely small family Georgia-based businesses who employ about 4,000 total employees across our state in everybody's community across this state, and are proud of being locally family-owned small businesses. We service all the accounts, whether they are multinational companies down to small corner stores. We are tasked in the regulations and the laws in Georgia to treat all of our retail partners equally. We service them equally as regardless of size, and provide that service because it is important to make sure that, as Georgia and many other states have made it, that it's important first and foremost on health and safety, that we're not tracking to chase and see how quickly we can get to the bottom on prices, that there's measures in place that the state has put there to ensure that it's not incentivized as Mike has said to just overconsumption. That's a black eye for anybody in the industry, whether you're a restaurant, a bar, a wholesaler, or a manufacturer. We have a responsibility to make sure that it's safely consumed in moderation and by design. The author of the bill that's before y'all today has indicated that there's an issue that he faces, and there's no argument that he faces an issue. I would like to describe the issue as there are minimums that are placed on there, as he's indicated even in his own business that he does, that apply to every retailer we have. And in his case, it's $250 as a minimum, which is the norm to go through there. That minimum is not just an arbitrary number. It's something that our guys, we want to make sure that our retail partners have the ability to function and sell their product. We need it to sell. We've invested in it. And we feel that's a number that it's just about inventory management at that point, of ordering the right amount when you can forecast what you're going to do, and it services those accounts. Creating the carve-out that he's described, I think the department has kind of hit on some of the issues of there. And one of the roles that I think the special agent may have hit on, but just was worth mentioning, is that the way that the system is set up with the 3 tiers, it's by design that the middle tier, the distributors that I represent, work kind of as a quasi-agent on the department's behalf. You can imagine the department has about 40 agents, give or take the day, and we go into 20,000 accounts. One of the things that we are responsible for is to ensure that that account has a valid license. Whether we look at that on the wall, where we look it up online, we have to do that every time to make sure they're there. If you allow, one of the concerns I think the special agent alluded to is you allow retailers to start purchasing from other retailers, you lose some of that control that the state requires to ensure that you have that compliance. Happy to answer any questions, but those are the concerns, and wanted to explain kind of the role that we play in servicing all these accounts, and that it's primarily an inventory management issue, not a structural issue.
Understood. Seeing no questions from the committee. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Honeyman, if you will, please join us. Introduce yourself.
I'll be very brief. I'm Casey Honeyman, Executive Director at the Wine and Spirit Wholesalers of Georgia. Thank you, Chairman Carpenter, for the discussion today. Between the department's presentation and Mr. Smith's comments, I really don't have too much to add other than right now as a state we have a clear line of sight and traceability, tax collection, public health and safety on these products. And as you start to move more to a retail-to-retail model, unfortunately, that there's a huge hole that happens there. One thing I did want to mention was, as it relates to some of the concerns, and we look forward to continuing the conversation offline for sure with Chairman Carpenter. But one thing, there were a couple concerns that were met. Martin just hit the minimums, storage and cash flow. We continue to talk about that. I think there's creative ways that we can talk about storage issues. You mentioned Ponce City Market, but certainly on the missed shipments, if there's a missed shipment, we as wholesalers have a process that's spelled out in rule and reg about how we can go and check for a missed shipment if there is an issue with that, make sure that we go back out and make sure that that order is fulfilled in the appropriate way. And also, I just want to be very clear, this as we kind of see it right now, this is really a solution searching for a problem, in the sense that right now this special case fee can be charged on an assortment of brands or one particular brand that is one case or less. That's 12 bottles or less. So I think we need to keep that in mind. So if we're talking about the minimums that Mr. Smith talked about, we're talking about less than one case of that's going out from our warehouses out to the marketplace. And we want to make sure that everyone remains compliant, that these taxes are paid. But as we move more to a retail-to-retail model, unfortunately, a lot of that compliance, it's kind of like taking the hole from the bottom of the dam and putting it at the top, right? And everything from tax collection, public health and safety starts to go out the window. So again, happy to answer any questions, but Chairman Carpenter, of course, look forward to working with you on it.
Seeing no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. McGill, I think that is our last speaker, so if you will, join us, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, members of the committee. My name is Stoney McGill, represent Georgia Alcohol Dealers Association. I'm the executive director. We represent about 400 retail liquor stores across the state. We're just big believers in the three-tier system. We know how slippery slopes go. Once you start breaking down the system, we feel like that it would never stop. We have certainly, under this proposal, some of my retailers may be in a position to sell to some other retailers, but we do not want to see any further cracks in the three-tier system. We feel like it's a system that works very well. It works well to keep an even playing field for all retailers around the state, and we're just strong believers in it, and want to hope that you guys, I'm happy to work with you going down the road, but just don't want to see any more breaks in the three-tier system.
Thanks, sir. Seeing no questions, Chairman Carpenter, would you join us? If I could ask 2 questions myself, if you please, sir. I'll go ahead and start the first one while you're making your way. So I've already admitted I'm not in your business.
Sure.
So I've got to go back to the minimum, and to Mr. Smith's point and how he described that. I need to understand more where that becomes a problem. And
sure.
I'm going to give an example. You use the example of you wouldn't cater for 5 people at, let's just use a round number. It's $20 a head. I mean, that doesn't make financial sense.
Sure.
So I need to understand more about the minimum and how you view that would be different from your catering business choosing not to, or choosing to implement a minimum, no different than a wholesaler implementing that. Could you speak to that, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
please?
absolutely. So, like I said, I'm not against wholesalers having minimums. As a businessman and a finance major, I understand the need for minimums. It has to make sense to make those drops. Like, it makes perfect sense. But if you run, let's say you run a bar, or let's say a hotel bar. I got a hotel bar. Bar is just something to get people to stay in the hotel. It's not my main business. That bar does $4,000 a week in revenue. All right. If you're doing $4,000 a week in revenue, you're probably buying $1,000 a week worth of liquor. All right. You have products in 7 different buckets that you have to order from 7 different suppliers to get a limited number of SKUs. You still have 7 suppliers. If everybody has a minimum, and you really like this one because you're buying most of your stuff from there because that's just the products you need. So now you have 4 or 5 that you might only need. You might only need $250 for a month or 2 months. And there's another one, same thing. And there's another one, same thing. Oh, and this guy, every time you order, never shows up. So you have a hard time getting that product. So there's no avenue for people to be able to solve those problems. And that's what the legislation's about. It's not about creating a cottage industry and making liquor unhealthy, making it more accessible, et cetera. It's literally just saying provide people an avenue to do solutions that many are already solving on their own. And the industry offline would be willing to admit, I imagine.
I very much disagree with your description there. I'm sure you buy from multiple vendors that provide your food, and I think to the point that was made from the wholesalers and the department, I mean, that's there from a health and safety standpoint, no different than I want to know that your food has gone through inspection when I eat it. I like to see that score when I walk into Oakwood and know that it's 100, right? I mean, I 60s probably don't make people very happy there.
Sure.
But I question going around an established system for a minimum of $250, where in the situation we might be talking about a couple of bottles. So that's fine that we may have just a personal disagreement,
Sure.
and I'm not in it enough to see it. But if I could ask you my second question, I'm going to quote the line. If you don't have a copy, that's fine. But on line 79, it says, each retail dealer, I want you to get, that's fine. I didn't know you had a copy over there. Sorry, 79. You there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Each retail dealer designated by small business, blah, 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 shall maintain accurate records of any and all alcoholic beverages sold to such small business and make such records available to the department upon request. All right, let's go with, I think Chairman Jaspers used the Costco deal. So you're running the hotel bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you need to run to Costco to pick up 3 bottles of Cabernet because Chairman Williamson comes in and he prefers that grape, right?
Sure.
And you go to Costco and grab those 3 bottles. You would be the small business and they would be the designated retailer.
Ssure.
Am I correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's predetermined, but yes.
Predetermined. So you've already, as the small business, brokered the deal, so to speak, and you know to go see John or Jane in Costco, and they're in charge of being able to provide these records. How exactly, from a logistics standpoint, I'm trying to figure out. It's 8 o'clock on a Friday night. You run to Costco. You're supposed to see John or Jane. Grab those 3 bottles. John or Jane aren't there, as an example, or you have to sign off on a piece of paper. They have to sign off on a piece of paper. Somebody else is there as the general manager. Just logistically, how do you envision line 79 through 81?
So I think that actually proves a point against what the Department of Revenue said. I don't think this is conducive for big box retailers. I think this is more conducive to the guy running the liquor store that's the sole proprietor that's down there by himself and is always there. And you meet with that gentleman and say, hey, I got to designate a supplier, a retail supplier in my community or in my county. Would you be interested in doing that? And then there's a yes or no. It will require you to keep some records, and I think that's how that would be handled.
But please go back to my scenario and speak to that.
Oh, about going to the Costco, doing the Costco stuff?
Let's go with the liquor store.
Yeah.
John or Jane owns the liquor store, and John or Jane isn't there, and I'm I'm just a dude behind the counter trying to sell you a bottle of liquor.
Sure. Yeah, no, I understand. So it'd be no different than when I go to Kroger to buy chicken because my chicken supplier didn't send me chicken. I go to Kroger to buy the chicken. Well, I don't pay sales tax on chicken when I buy it at Kroger, so I have to fill out a little form every time I buy it. Even if I'm running around, I have to pull the form. They pull it from the back, and I sign that form. So it's literally a form on a clipboard that you would sign. It's not. I don't think it's a. I mean, when my employees go pick up chicken, they have to fill out the same form.
Okay.
And it's little 4 lines. It's not a big form.
Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to really understand, so the licensure requirement will be for the retailer to sell to another, or is it to the person who wants to purchase?
The purchase. It's the small business that needs the product. He would be the license holder. They currently would have a license already. It would just be a different tier of license that would allow them to go to the liquor store to buy it from. So it's retail to retail. Does that make sense?
It does. So it would be a management of supply issue for the person who runs out, for the retailer who runs out of their product.
Right.
Wishing to buy a product from another retailer.
That's right. So
and currently that is not acceptable.
No, ma'am.
However, if Karen Bennett wanted to go buy, I would be able to buy.
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Carpenter, I guess I'm looking at this and I'm just going through my life's experiences. Maybe it's as similar as the chairman did. When I go to your hotel and I look at and I'm staying there that night, I look across the offerings of beer, I go, okay, this is the 4 I've got. I make a choice between those 4. I guess what I'm getting at, Casey, is how big a problem is this? I mean, to go through the big change that's here, because I think I think I'm just a normal consumer. Yeah, we got 3 bottles of bourbon. That's my choice. I'm not going to go, well, you don't have Knob Creek. I'm leaving. I guess.
So I would argue that there are some specific people that drink specific things that if you don't have it, we'll may have a drink and leave. But the reality is, what I offer at my hotel is really constricted. So it's not as a big an issue for me. But if you have a bar that has 60 bottles on the wall, they're really running into problems. Because they have so much, and they're not moving. It's all about the volume of the product they're moving. If they're not moving that much volume, like, I'm out of this, you got this. No, I'm sorry, I'm out of this. Like, it's a bigger problem the more SKUs you offer.
Well, but like if I'm in you have a great hotel. I mean, if y'all haven't looked at Casey's Hotel, the Carpentry, you've got to. It's beautiful. But I'm there, and I'm going to pick from what you got, generally.
Sure.
I guess how big an issue is it across the state to be looking at an issue like this that consumers are going, I didn't get fancy wine, whatever. I don't know. I guess that's what I'm.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
with, not. I would argue. I would agree with Martin. It's not. This is not something that's a huge problem.
Yeah.
But it is something that's happening that I think we can have reasonable conversations about it to make sure that people that are trying. So for instance, I don't know. Have you Airbnb rentals? If you know anybody that rents Airbnbs, a lot of times they'll say, "Hey, would you like to add a bottle of champagne for your stay?" Breaking the law. They're selling you a bottle of champagne so you and your wife can have a romantic evening. They're breaking the law. There's no avenue for them to not break the law other than order 300 bottles of, $300 worth of champagne to give you. It's just not. There's things like that happen. Wedding caterers, people that cater weddings run into the same issues. So it is a bigger issue than we're talking about. It's not the huge issue. I'm not trying to make it a huge issue. The $250,000 is a high number. I agree. I'm not interested in everybody moving over to it, but I think having conversations about what's happening in the real world is important.
Chairman Carpenter, if I could, last thing. The department, I'm not going to go back and play their testimony, but I wrote down as best as I could that they said that this would create a subcategory license that falls outside the three-tier system. Would you generally agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, no different than the catering license that fell out of it, or the brew pub license that fell out of it.
Agreed. I'm not comfortable creating that license.
Sure.
With the fact that you haven't spoken to the Department of Revenue.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not pointing a finger at you nor at the department, but my request is if I'm going to be the one to ask what's the will of this committee, and we're going to talk about creating a subcategory license that falls outside the three-tier system, I have to request that you spend time with the department.
Absolutely.
A lot of OCGA things up there that I don't have written on the back of my hand.
Yeah.
And are not in my, again, I'm giving it to you. I'm not in your industry. You're facing it, you're seeing a problem, and you're trying to fix a problem for like-minded entrepreneurs and retailers. And I'm certainly with you on that. But I can't call for a vote on this until I understand that the department can look at me and say, yes, we've done X, Y, and Z, and there's nothing to this, and this fits and this works, but I have to ask you to start there.
Yeah, yeah.
and
I
address
don't have an issue with that at all.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I was surprised to see him today. We dropped this bill 3 or 4 weeks ago and hadn't heard a peep out of anybody. And I guess they just figured, it's an alcohol bill. It's not going anywhere. There's no reason to even communicate on it. But I see Austin in Ways and Means every week, so I'm kind of surprised he kind of failed to mention that they had some heartburn with it. But love to sit down with him and talk about it because I like to make efficient government more efficient.
Just remember, that's a two-way street, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
All right.
No doubt about it.
Without objection, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.